Redfall has been receiving a lot of negative press at launch. While some of it is perfectly valid, such as criticising the poor performance or janky enemy AI, I've also noticed a lot of people just jumping onto the hate bandwagon in order to be negative for negativity's sake. And this I don't like. While there's always room for constructive criticism, and informing people of the flaws of a product so they can decide if they want to purchase it or not is a good thing to do, when people start getting their kicks from complaining and relish in being cruel, I get bummed out. And so, to counter this a little, I've decided to put together a video talking about 7 things I think Redfall does well. To kick off the list, we have the music. The music in this game is pretty great, and I feel like that's something just about everyone can agree on. Some of the tracks are real bangers, and the music just fits really well in the sort of horror but through science vibe, avoiding more classical sounding instruments and adding a little bit of tech in to really place the feel of it in the present or a near future reality. Whenever I'm playing, the music just seems to fit right. I'm someone who can be pretty fussy about music and OSTs of games, and I've often been feeling a little underwhelmed, but here, I'm happy. When you're in a safe house, there's a fairly chill tune but still with enough of an edge to remind you of the dangers outside. When out exploring the streets, the music goes quiet, allowing you to listen out for signs of danger and let the emptiness envelop you. And when combat starts, the music ramps up to match the intensity. The soundtrack is great, and throughout this video I'll be playing music from the game itself in the background, rather than my standard YouTube audio library copyright-free tracks, which my core audience have heard about 100 times over now. The audio for the game is not only good on its own, it also helps to greatly enhance the atmosphere going on. At its core, I'd say that Redfall is an action game with strong horror elements. A lot of the game is meant to feel creepy and put you slightly on edge, and I think that it does a decent job of that. A lot of the buildings are without power, leading to you either exploring in the dark or using the limited light of your torch. When in town, there will be enemies scattered around the place, often behind buildings, meaning that you can hear them talking but can't see them, creating a tense game of trying to approach or avoid them based on audio cues. And if you ventured into the caves, you know all too well just how grim the setting can become. At the time I'm writing this, I've only died once, and it was when I went down into the caves, ended up in the red mist, and then freaked out and failed to escape it. Plenty of in-game locations lend themselves to the dark vibes, as seeing things like an abandoned movie theatre or hospital just inherently seem to unsettle us, as we all know that's not how things should be. Overall, the atmosphere of the game is strong, and really shines in some places. On to a somewhat smaller detail that I personally love to see: character-specific dialogue. There are 4 playable characters in Redfall, and each have their own personality. As such, while progressing through the game, they'll have different things to say whenever something happens. Initially, Layla is somewhat scared and reluctant to face the situation she's found herself in, while Devinder is excited to finally have been proven right about the existence of cryptids of some kind. On top of this, NPCs that you meet will occasionally have different lines depending on who you're playing as. For example, when meeting Dr. Hunt, you may get some kind of fairly generic greeting like this.
Mr. Krausley. Did I say that right?
But if you're playing as Layla, then the Doctor will recognise you and have this to say.
Miss Ellison, I'm so happy to see you.
Dr. Hunt? Oh my god, I'm so glad you're okay.
I don't want to think about what would have happened if you hadn't shown up.
Not only does this add a little bit of character to the world and its inhabitants, but it helps to vary up multiple playthroughs. While you may well end up doing the same missions each time, you at least get to see some small changes through the dialogue. Back onto a more gameplay focus point now: movement. Specifically, there's 2 points I want to cover here: sliding and climbing. When you're sprinting, you can tap the crouch button in order to go into a slide, helping you rapidly move under barriers or look really cool while firing your weapon. Being able to slide and shoot is something I'm seeing more and more in first-person shooters these days, and I love it. I was a huge fan of the Titanfall games because of how well they incorporated movement into the gunplay, and while I don't think any other games have hit their high quite yet, it's good to see some advanced movement options becoming commonplace. The other point to talk about is climbing. While there's nothing necessarily special about the act of climbing itself, the game does a good job at ensuring you can fairly easily get on top of buildings or rooftops, be it by ensuring there's a fire escape on the side of large buildings, or parking a car or truck near shorter ones. This encourages the player to not just stick on the ground, but go up high, and by doing so you're able to get the drop on enemies or scout the area more effectively. Verticality is another thing that I think is going to be more focused on by level designers going forward, and I'm all for it. If we're exploring a three-dimensional space, then we shouldn't be limited to just moving around the x-axis. I feel like I should add that, as someone who has primarily been playing as Layla, the verticality comes even more into play thanks to the summonable lift. While not initially having a real combat capability, I found myself using it more and more, just to ensure I'm fully exploring the world. And when I'm in combat, I'll use the umbrella to block damaging shots from cultists, and then shoot it at a weakened vampire in order to instantly kill them. And for the times I'm surrounded, I can summon Jason in order to thin out the herd. What I'm saying here is that the character abilities are really cool. They all have clear uses and help to define the roles of each person you play as. Remy is great for causing a distraction, be it through Rebon making noise, or throwing some C4 for a shorter but much more destructive diversion. Dev is able to cause great damage within a small radius, thanks to the combo of the Arc Javelin and his light ability, and Jacob is possibly the most well-themed, being able to turn invisible, tag enemies, and perfectly snipe targets for stealthy insta-kills. There's a great selection of abilities, which not only differentiate the characters, but also can complement one another if playing in co-op. Even more so than the dialogue, it's these skills and the upgrades you apply to them, which can make it worthwhile to try out the game as more than just whoever you first picked. The variety doesn't stop at character skills, however, as there's a good deal of enemy variety too. There's the obvious part of the undead and the living being different to fight against, but there's much more than that. When it comes to the living, we have cultists and bellwether. Typically the military lot come in much smaller groups, but seem better equipped, making it a smart move to take them on stealthily in order to not take damage back. The cultists tend to travel in large packs, meaning you might want to lure a group of them into environmental damage in order to thin them out, rather than trying a head-on assault into a hail of bullets. And to break it down even further, I noticed that the cultists with a ghostly white glow around their heads were snipers, and the same with bellwether, but instead of glow they seem to have laser sights. As such, I'd often want to counter-snipe these enemies before rushing in, so that if I needed to retreat, there was less of a chance of getting picked off. And when we look at the vampire side of things, there's even more distinct variety. While the standard vampires will just teleport around and try to slash at you from close range, the variations can prove trickier to deal with. Watchers will stay up high and overlook locations, ready to alert to your presence if they spot you before you take them out. Anglers will try and draw you in with their whips? Fishing lines? I don't know what they are. I just know that I don't want to be caught by them, and as such I stay well away. Then there's enemies like the Bloodbags or Sin Eater, whose bulging bulbous bodies look repulsive and compel you to stay away from them. Probably a good thing too, as you don't want to get caught in the blast of a dying Bloodbag. Then we have Shrouds, who seem much better at dodging damage by moving through floors, and there's shielded vampires out there, who you'll need to time your shots correctly in order to damage. Honestly, the enemy variety is great, and I really hope a patch comes along soon to help with the lag and AI behaviour, because if they can fix those things, then fights could become much, much more interesting to deal with. And finally, we come to the last point. The reason I plan on beating this game at least once, even if it never gets patched. The story. Or more accurately, uncovering the story. Redfall is a mystery. While you get a little backstory for the characters, and we know a tiny bit about what's been going on in town due to the game's trailers, all of the specifics of what led you to the situation we find ourselves in are left for you to uncover as you progress through quests and explore more of the world. There's 4 main vampires you're tracking down in the game, and with each of them you'll be learning how they came to be what they are just by playing the game. I want to know what happened to Redfall, And so much of that is thanks to the game not bombarding us with endless exposition at the start of things. We're given the basics of how we got to the starting point, but how the town at large got to this point is left for us to find out, and I'm a real sucker for any story that lets me piece things together, rather than just throwing narrative at me like I'm watching a movie. Although ironically enough, there is a point where you essentially find a movie to uncover some of the story, but I still liked it anyway. And there we have it, 7 things that I really enjoy about Redfall. The game has had a real rough launch, and definitely needed a bit more time in the oven. But with any luck, we'll be getting plenty of early patches to improve the state of things, and make this into a game that everyone can easily enjoy. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like. All support right now is certainly needed and greatly appreciated. Leave a comment below with anything you particularly like about Redfall. I'd love to see a little positivity about this game. And finally, do feel free to subscribe if you want to listen to me talk more about video games in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.